welcome back to the show. My next guest is Mr. Laurence Tognetti. He is a 6-year Air Force veteran, a bachelor's and master's degree recipient from the School of Earth and Space Exploration at Arizona State, and author of the newly released book, Outer Solar System Moons, Your Personal 3D Journey. You can follow him on Twitter and Instagram at ET_exists. So, Laurence, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Doing very, very well, Mike. Thank you for having me.
I appreciate you being on.
Yeah, sure. No, I very much appreciate you having me. As you said in that intro, yes, I'm a 6-year military United States Air Force veteran. Upon leaving, I first attended Florida Tech, wanting to be closer to home. I transferred to Arizona State, graduated 2017 bachelor's, 2019 with my master's degree. Now I'm kind of in limbo, but to kind of fill the void in that limbo, yes, I did just write, self-published my first book, Outer Solar System Moons, Your Personal 3D Journey, which you can find on Etsy. I tried putting it on Amazon. The fees were just a little bit too much for me, and I had to sell it for way higher than I wanted it to. But it being on Etsy, I could sell it for much cheaper. I just want to kind of warn everyone out there, I'm getting over kind of a nasty sinus infection. So if I have to start like coughing or something, I'm just going to hit the mute button and go over to wherever I have to. Sinus infections are no joke. They really are. But yes, thank you very much for having me.
I appreciate it. I just want to start off by saying thanks for your service. As a veteran, I appreciate what you did.
You're very welcome, and thank you very much for your service as well.
Thank you. I appreciate it. So I figured we kind of start off with the big question, and that is, why space?
The big question. The big question. All right, no, all right, fine. Hit me.
Yeah. So why space?
Why space?
Mm-hmm.
The bigger question is, why not space? I mean, like that right there is the bigger question. Why not space?
Yep.
Why space? Because there's just something that's just completely that has just grabbed me as a child, and I think really just grabs all of us when we look up at the night sky. It's just this, as human beings, we have this just natural curiosity to just want to know
mm-hmm.
what is out there, what's around the next corner, why does that star twinkle the way it does. And just something about just space has always just grabbed me, and as it grabs pretty much everyone around the world.
Yep.
As a kid, I dreamed about going to the moon, going to Mars. I'm looking at numerous posters around. Laptop's kind of too clunky to kind of spin it, but I got space posters all around. I can turn this though. I got Contact, the best sci-fi movie of all time.
Yep.
Right there. But space has just had this hold over me since I was a kid. I've always been fascinated with the planet Mars. I always envisioned myself traveling there one day, and I still do, as we all do.
Yep.
But it's just something about it. Like I'm even fumbling words right now to just describe it, because it's just this like indescribable feeling that I've just always had, that I just look up at the night sky and I'm just in awe of just where we are, and and asking questions why we're here, and as which is no different than anyone else who who looks up at the night sky and sees just the indescribable beauty of it.
Yeah, I don't really find, I'm sure there's a lot of people out there, because like on the previous episode we kind of went into the whole flat earth people and stuff like that. There's not many people I personally know though that don't look at space and just wonder, like what can we expect to discover, and all the wonders that are up there.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I'm a lot like you. I'm just like, anything and everything about space is just like the biggest thing to me. It's just like the most miraculous thing pretty much every single day. So
it is just looking up at the night sky in a preferably a non-light polluted area.
Yeah, true.
You're just there's just something about it just grabs you. You just instantly want to know. There we go. You just like instantly want to know, or you instantly ask yourself, what's out there? Are we alone? And the most important question is, are we alone? Is there more life out there? And every single one of us asks that question when we look up at the night sky. And what most people don't realize is that everyone is an astronomer. You don't have to have a PhD. You don't have to be, excuse me. You don't have to be like Neil deGrasse Tyson, celebrity status to be an astronomer. Everyone is an astronomer. Just looking up. Astronomy is literally looking up. It's literally what it is.
Yeah, all you have to do is use those two things you're born with that enable you to view anything and everything, pretty much, our eyes. So you can see half the universe if you really want to look hard enough, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And then seeing it in a, as I've seen, as I'm confident you've seen as well, seeing it out in the middle of nowhere in a non-light polluted area, you were just blown away. Seeing it in a city, I live in Phoenix. There's light pollution. I see here and there, but what's cool about Arizona, you could just drive out like 15 minutes in the middle of nowhere, and just the entire sky takes over.
Yep. Yeah, I remember the first time I was actually able to see the Milky Way. At a beach. I was born and raised in Tampa, but we live currently in the Orlando area. Okay. So we went to a beach a little bit about 40 minutes south of Tampa, and one night you could just look up and see pretty much the entire Milky Way. And it was the most like mind-blowing thing to me at the time.
Oh, it is. That and the two most mind-blowing things I've ever seen in terms of the night sky are the Milky Way, which I've seen tons of times, and the Northern Lights.
It's something I still haven't gotten a chance to see yet. I hope to one day, though.
Oh, I would highly recommend it. I was stationed in Alaska for 3 years. I could do without the -70 Fahrenheit ever again. That was, I would not recommend that. But just seeing the Northern Lights and the way they just kind of move and they whip and the different colors, you are literally watching nature at work. Mm-hmm. And that and seeing the Milky Way are the two most mind-blowing things I've ever seen in terms of the night sky.
Yes, I've never run into anybody, I guess I should say, that denies the beauty of the universe. When you look at the colors and of nurseries and just like galaxies, it's insane how the colors and stuff are.
I don't mean to be a kind of like buzzkill or anything, but one thing that is kind of disappointing, if you want to put it that way, is like showing people something like the Orion Nebula in a telescope, mm-hmm. and they see that it looks nothing like it does in these big fancy photographs. But that's all like Photoshop trickery and stuff. But mm-hmm. even without all that, the universe is just spectacular, and it's just mind-blowingly huge. And just the question that comes across everyone's mind is, are we alone? Which I firmly believe that we're not.
Yeah, like I was saying on the last episode, I think it's naive to believe that we're the only thing in the universe. That just seems like even the basic math would point that we can't be the only thing. Even if you don't believe in aliens, necessarily that there's life somewhere is just an average, that it's going to happen somewhere. It's impossible that we're the only things here. Yeah.
If you were to, I started doing the math and I got something else got in the way. But if you were to break down take the size of the Milky Way, which is about 100,000 light years across and about 1,000 light years thick, and do the math on that, Matt, to figure out the cubic light years, and then mm-hmm. if you were to take every Earth, because Earth now has our radio signals have gone out about 100 light years, mm-hmm. and if you were to put all those kind of just lined up, just like just kind of just crammed against each other, there would be beyond billions, like I said, I have to do the math, of potential technological civilizations out there,
Mm-hmm.
but we just haven't heard from them.
Yeah, we just
And
haven't gotten far enough yet.
yeah. Say what?
So we just haven't gotten far enough yet to probably
Exactly.
hear from them. Yeah.
And so that's why I think we haven't heard from ET yet, because space is just unfathomably, unquantifiably big. And our radio signals have only gone out, as I said, 100 light years.
Mm-hmm.
And the Milky Way is 100,000 light years across. And I think where people get a little bit discouraged is as to why we haven't heard from ET yet, is because everyone wants to think that ET's like chilling at like the next star over, which in this case is like Alpha Centauri.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not the case. I believe that at minimum, the nearest technological civilization similar to our own is at minimum probably like 1,000 light years away. And let's just say that they evolved at the exact same rate as we did.
Mm-hmm.
As I said, ours have only gone out 100 light years, which means theirs have only gone out 100 light years. They're signals. So it's just based on just literal space and time. That's why we haven't heard from anyone yet. But space is just unfathomably big. But I obviously think it's only just a literal matter of time until we hear from ET.
Yeah, I think so as well, especially like you're saying, we've only been around for literally like a drop of nothing in the scale of the universe.
It's like a drop of it's.
Yeah, we're like less than a grain of sand on the beach at this point.
Yeah, we are.
So I wanted to. Just one thing I thought was funny, since we mentioned contact, and you have the poster there up on your room.
Yep.
Is I wanted to. I kind of laughed when we were emailing about coming on the show, as your nod to the movie in your email there, right? Of the title of your email.
Yes.
And I kind of found that pretty comical, and that gave me a little bit of a laugh. So
4.4623 gigahertz.
Yep. I was like, that's awesome. I like that.
I lucked out with that email, just like I lucked out with my Twitter and Instagram handles. I don't know how I lucked out with those. I'm
really surprised. I know one had taken that before you got that. But I mean, I guess there's not as many people who are like space related stuff on the platform, possibly. I don't know.
I mean, they're on Twitter there are, but no, you're right. I think I lucked out because I've been on Twitter since like 2009.
Mm-hmm.
And back then Twitter wasn't as MySpace was like the thing back then.
Yep.
Twitter just started becoming a thing in, just this last decade. And so I think that's why I really lucked out with that. And I really lucked out with that email.
Yeah, I found that way too funny, and I don't think my wife appreciated it as much as I did. But
no, yeah, I got that one. I set up that email less than a year ago.
Okay.
I sell shirts and mugs on on top of the book, I sell a growing popular website of space themed stuff, and you'll find it at etexist.com.
Okay.
Promo code I think it's I love space, all one word, for free shipping. And it's just like anything, it's an investment. I've had some purchasers, some buyers, but no, I've been fortunate enough to luck out on that domain name, on the email, on the Twitter handle, and I just wish my luck would hold in terms of PhD applications.
Yeah, I've been following you lately, and I know you've. It seems like you maybe have had some setbacks with that, but I'm assuming you're going to keep striving forward to get accepted by one of those, right?
Oh yeah. This last time was sort of my fault. Because in terms of research, I kind of bounced around. When I was at Florida Tech, I got there in 2013, and they had an astrobiology bachelor's degree, and they still do. And it was still relatively new. It was literally only like a few years old at the time. So like research availability in terms of like astrobiology or even like just planetary science was very limited. And so I jumped, but I jumped at the chance to work on exoplanets with a man called with a man named Dr. Darren Ragazine, who's since left. He went back home to Utah. He's at BYU now. And so I did that for 2 years when I was at Florida Tech, transferred to Arizona State, did exoplanets for a semester, and then I just kind of wanted to kind of broaden my research range. And this class that I took, outer solar system satellites, taught by Dr. Alyssa Roden, who has since left CC, the School of Earth and Space Exploration. She got up and moved to Boulder, Colorado, and that class really grabbed me. And so I was on Europa for a year, studying what's called chaos formation. And then when I graduated in 2017, I decided I just kind of wasn't done learning. I kind of wasn't ready for the workforce yet. And so I was fortunate enough to stick around to work with Dr. Jim Bell and Dr. Tanya Harrison, who was his postdoc, who was my supervisor, studying what's called paraglacial landforms, known as scalloped depressions on Mars. And we use this to kind of like contribute to what's called the like Martian global climate model. And so this, when I was finishing up my master's, I applied for the PhD program in CC to do some work to kind of finish this geochemistry work on my senior capstone. And I got rejected. I had 3 potential funding sources, because one thing I want to stress to everyone who's watching this is that everything in this field is based on funding. If you have funding, you can do it. If you can't, you just can't do it. I had 3 funding sources, two fellowships, and one from a faculty member, and they all fell through. He didn't get his funding, and I didn't get accepted for these fellowships, so I was turned down. And then I started helping Darren Ragazine with a paper, getting a paper published based on work we did at Florida Tech, and I really started to kind of bring back really great memories of working with him and working on exoplanets. And so I got the 3 letters that I needed, but I fell short from all of them, because I just didn't really consider that I was severely lacking in the physics coursework and the necessary graduate level physics coursework. When I was at Florida Tech, their astrobiology program is very physics heavy, whereas when I transferred to Arizona State, this was more geology heavy. And so I've only taken up to physics 2. That's nowhere near sufficient enough to survive in a graduate level physics course or physics, course load. So I just didn't think it through. But since that time, I got the bulk of my rejections came in January. But even then, as soon as I got rejected from one that I got very close to getting into. But they ultimately said it was because of my lack of physics coursework. They didn't mention anything about like GPA or GRE. They obviously I had the research experience, but having that coursework is very, very necessary. I immediately cranked out my master's thesis, which is about to be kind of go through the like peer review process. And so next cycle, I'm confident that I'm going to be set up very well. I'm going to have my thesis published. I think I'm going to get a letter from a colleague. So yeah, no, I applied to 6 this cycle. I've heard from 5. I got rejected from all 5. I haven't heard from the 6th one yet, but I anticipate I'm probably going to get rejected just strictly based on the lack of physics coursework. I know that huge deal is always made about GPA and GRE and this and that. The GRE is slowly going away. It's becoming a rapidly outdated exam. My alma mater, CC, the School of Earth and Space Exploration, actually we just got a new director last summer, and one of the first things she did was she completely eliminated the GRE as a requirement, and that department takes on average 300 applicants a year. It is one of the largest, the most well-known space science programs in the country, and they just eliminated the GRE. And as far as GPA goes, I had an undergrad GPA of like 3.07. So, you're always allowed to round up. So I had like a 3.1.
Mm-hmm.
But I've only heard from one school that GPA affected it. But this, as I said, I almost got in to one other school. I can't obviously say where, but excuse me, GPA was so low on the list of the reasons why they didn't accept me. So
Mm-hmm.
if you kind of if your GPA isn't perfect, don't get down, don't get discouraged. If you got really strong letters, if you have the background, if you've been published, which is why I think next cycle I'm going to be way more set up. I'm going to be set up far more for success than I was this cycle in terms of having the background. I have the master's degree. I'm going to get published this year.
Mm-hmm.
I've already been published a few times. Obviously, I got my I got my book. I got a couple papers, one couple on exoplanets, one on Mars, Mars analog study. I have another Mars analog study. I'm actually doing a research trip next weekend. So next cycle I'm gonna be set up really well.
That's the one I've seen you write about online. I don't know if we want to throw his name out in case he doesn't want that out there, but that you're going into the desert, right, for that one?
Yes, yeah. We are going to northern Arizona to study Martian. Well, we're going to study what's known as analogs,
mm-hmm.
Earth analogs, kind of the like Earth equivalents to gullies on Mars, or past past riverbeds on Mars. And he actually just bought a drone to kind of help us better with that, which I'm glad he was able to, because he asked me if I have one. I'm like, I'm way too poor to even think about buying a drone.
Yeah, they can run some money, especially if you're getting like one of the good ones for like cinematography and things like that.
Oh yeah, no, it's I'm not really sure what he got. He sent me the link and it looked really fancy, and I don't want to know how much he spent on it.
I figured I'd ask, since like we're on the whole contact thing, is that you being a scientist, you hopefully get your PhD here soon, is when you watch a movie, let's say not like from the 90s or early 2000s, but just any movie from nowadays, and it shows space in it, or a TV show, does it make you angry? Does it make you upset? You get happy at times? Like, because I watch certain movies, I'm like, come on guys, like really? You couldn't get that basic level of understanding into the movie? Like, come on.
You're talking about like scientific accuracies?
Yeah. Like even
Yes,
like the basic stuff, it just pisses me off sometimes. I'm like, and I'm no scientist, I'm just a dude who loves space, and even I understand that, like, come on now.
Yeah, one movie I have yet to see, but apparently drives people crazy is Gravity.
Yeah.
I've yet to see it. But ever since I kind of like entered this field, I have noticed that I'm a bit nitpicky in terms of like certain accuracies and certain ways of doing things.
Mm-hmm.
And just which is no different when I ever since joining the military, I see like military movies.
Yeah, same way.
And there are like certain things, like especially the like uniform, they just never want to get the uniform right.
Yep.
There's
or they never reload or something. You're like, come on, man.
Well, and it's just like, really, dude. I was Air Force. I was spoiled, so like there's the like running joke is calling it the chair force.
Yeah.
And so I never saw combat. I do know friends who did. So the only really thing that I can relate to is the like just kind of like common everyday thing. As I mentioned, the like uniform, just certain like little like inaccuracies where they would place certain things. You're just like, no, bro, no,
Yep.
no. And I still can't figure out why they do that. I don't know if they'll get sued for having a like perfect looking uniform. I don't know, but yes, in terms of like science movies, I have noticed that I'm a little bit skeptical of certain things. And one movie, which is a brilliant film, is The Martian. Great film, great story, thoroughly enjoyed it from start to finish. But I will never let go of the fact as to why that crew was so young.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
They were like, and being the total nerd I am, I of course have to like buy the movie on Blu-ray and I have to watch the special features.
Of course. Yeah, you
Yeah.
have to. Yeah.
Yeah, and so there's this one special feature on there called, I totally forget what it's called. It's like this quick little 4-minute feature where they put each astronaut in isolation for like 10 days and then they're like being interviewed by this psychologist afterwards. And during the interview, their bio comes up next to them. And being the total nerd I am, of course I had to pause it and like read each bio. Do you know how old Kate Mara's character? Kate Mara was the one who ended up marrying Winter Soldier at the end. Which actually a lot of people don't know. Yes, that is actually Winter Soldier, Sebastian Stan. A lot of people don't know that.
It's the same dude. Yep.
Yeah, same dude. And so Kate Mara's character, her name was Johansson. She was the big like the computer nerd. Do you know how old her character was in that movie?
It's been a while since I looked it up, but if I had to guess right now from recollection, probably like 28, something like that.
Close. It was actually 29.
Yeah.
I don't understand. Like 29. At 29, you barely have the like psychological aptitude to deal with adulthood as it is. So I don't understand how you would have the psychological aptitude to deal with going to another planet knowing there's a good chance you're not coming back. Like I mean, I for one am steadfast on two things: that whoever we first send to Mars, one, they're going to have to be older, probably 40s or 50s.
Yep.
Because I'm told, because of the whole like radiation thing, you don't really. I'm told. I at the moment I'm forgetting facts. Forgive me, but I'm just told that the kind of like older you get, the less maybe harmful the radiation would be on you. I'm totally just smashing words together. I'm so like
maybe just because of your genetics at that time might not be rapidly evolving as much as when you're younger, possibly something to that extent.
Maybe, you know, as I said, I'm not remembering everything. I've just been told by several scientists in my field that they being NASA like to send older people into space, 40s, 50s, because the whole radiation factor isn't as big of a factor as it would be if say you were younger. But I'm just based on my own military experience in terms of like marriages and what I saw in terms of a lot of divorces from guys from guys and gals from the, you know, from men and women who deployed overseas. I saw a lot of divorces, a lot of bad marriages. And so as kind of like odd of a stance as this is, I've also voiced my opinion in terms of sending people who aren't married or who or specifically who don't have kids. And the reason is because we don't know what's going to happen. And we almost lost Apollo 13 just going to the moon.
Yep.
Now, having listened to the old Apollo, recordings when I was a student worker at the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter Camera Science Ops Center on campus, one of my tasks was to listen to the old recordings. I can tell you that the real incident was nowhere near as dramatic as the movie. It was nowhere near as unprepared, or it was like, oh, Houston, we have a problem, oxygen tank blew, and NASA's response might as well have been, well, yeah, it sucks, bro. Yeah, let's go ahead and pull out backup plan. What is this? Oh, yeah, you're fine. Just do this and this and swing around the moon and you'll be fine. That's basically what it was.
Mm-hmm.
But now we're talking about sending people to another planet. Does NASA plan for the worst? Do they do very well at planning for the worst? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
However, we're still talking about sending people to another planet. And I just think it would be, I'm not sure if better is the right word. I just think it would be less of a burden, I hope that's the right word, on not just the astronauts, but on folks back here if we send people out there who kind of have the least amount of attachments back home.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm speaking mainly in terms of having a family, because as terribly cynical as this sounds, I believe that the first crew that we send to Mars, if you don't kill them all, you're going to kill most of them. And
I think it's just bound to happen, because I mean, we know what happens to the rovers, but we have no idea how human physiology will react to being on that planet.
Oh yeah, and especially, I mean, we spoke about the whole radiation thing, but you're still talking about 6 months there, just based on the whole orbits, and this is something that just most people just aren't really aware of. We can't launch at any time. We have to wait until the planets are at a certain times, certain places in their orbits to launch, to where it'll only take 6 months to get there. But you have to wait another 12 months until they're back to where you can launch again.
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking 6 months there, getting blasted with radiation, cancer-causing radiation, a year on the surface, and then 6 months back. That's 2 years of getting bombarded with just this literal cancer-causing just space.
Mm-hmm.
And so, as just terrible as this sounds, I just think, just in terms of the like first crew, I think it would be, I don't know, just the phrase, the only phrase I can think of right now is just, it would be less of a burden on, not just on them in terms of having to focus on the mission, accepting that they might not be coming home. But it would be sort of less of a burden on folks back here, because it's not just the radiation. It's, if like every little thing has to go right, in there are several things about the movie The Martian that I really enjoyed. One was he actually got most of the scientific stuff right.
Mm-hmm.
He did it. Andy Weir did come out later and say that the whole like giant hurricane winds at the start of the movie were very inaccurate, because the surface pressure on Mars is like 1/100th. I'm the numbers are totally escaping me right now, but it's significantly less than it is on Earth. And so what would be a 60, 70 mile an hour wind on Earth is equivalent to like a very light breeze on Mars.
Yeah, from what I understand, you'd like barely even feel it.
Exactly.
That there was something even around you at the time.
Yeah. But the one thing I did like is he kept pointing out all the little things that Mark Watney needed to do to keep himself alive. You had the water reclaimer, the oxygen regulator, stuff like that. You know, he had to constantly maintain his space suits to make sure that they were working properly. If any literal one of those things goes wrong, just breaks, you're dead.
Yeah, pretty much like instantaneously almost.
Yeah, if that's HAB as they called it, if you had one puncture, you're dead.
I think one way they really kind of showcased that, which I almost wish they would have maybe highlighted for a little bit longer, was that night the storm was kind of like really pressing up against the HAB after he was like freaking out because he knew what could happen.
Yeah.
And I don't think maybe that kind of skimmed over a lot of people who may have watched it, unless you're like us, where you nitpick every little thing. But, that was a really great part, I think, in the movie to me.
Yes. No, yeah, it was. And I still remember that. He was physically counting each potato while he was doing that. And it was after the whole like walkway blew out and he had to like cover it with that tarp. And yeah, he's counting each one and like and just the way he was reacting, he knew he was just literally on the verge of just dying at just any second.
Yep.
And that's what I think most people don't understand in terms of going to Mars. It's a matter of getting there, but it's also a matter of yes, it's a matter of getting there. It's a matter of staying there for, probably a year and then coming home. But if just one thing goes wrong, you could have you could just fly through a meteor shower of like micrometeorites, and you could have one puncture in your ship and you're dead.
There goes the whole ship.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. There goes, the whole ship. You could have, solar flare come through. Now, is NASA very good at kind of like, they were especially during the Apollo missions, NASA was very good at, determining when solar flares would be coming through so that the, Apollo astronauts were kind of safe. Although during Apollo 17, they kind of did this experiment where they deliberately flew through a solar flare, and it was a scientific experiment where they put blinders over their eyes, because when you close your eyes and you're going through a solar storm, the radiation messes with the like fluid in your brain, and you literally see like lightning flashes when your eyes are closed. And so they would do this experiment where they would tell noon, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, where these flashes were. But if you get if you fly through a solar flare big enough, your whole crew's literally just fried and dead. And
I know Scott Kelly spoke a lot about that after he came back from his mission of sleeping and just seeing the flashes and stuff like that.
Oh yeah. And the International Space Station is still obviously well within Earth's the magnetosphere. So they're still relatively safe, but once you leave that protective magnetosphere, it's just like all bets are off. It's just game on.
The one part of the Martian, which is probably most people's criticism of the movie, is the whole Iron Manning through space to meet up with her, puncturing his suit. And my biggest thing, again, I'm not an astronaut, so I'm not really qualified to speak on spacewalks and anything like that. But it's like I imagine it'd be harder than that to puncture your suit. And two, would you have the directional, like we're getting to the weeds over here, but you wouldn't have like the directional flow to control something like that. But that's movies, so you gotta make it interesting.
Yeah. Did you read the book actually?
I did, yeah.
Yeah, it's not in the book. He mentions it in the book. He says, "Hey, why don't I puncture my suit?" And then they say no. And then the book ends up with Sebastian Stan's character like just going out much how
Mhm.
she did, on that tether, and just like catching his ship. And it was a pretty like low drama scene in the book, but you're right in terms of, yeah, we have to like spice things up for the movie.
Yeah.
It was a cool scene. Whether or not that could happen,
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, that was not my own biggest beef. Obviously, my biggest beef, my two biggest beefs was, one, how young the crew was, and two, that whole hurricane wind sandstorm at the
Mhm.
at the very start.
I think another movie which I love, and I think it's kind of 50-50 with people who have seen it, is Interstellar,
Yes.
when they're on the planet that's just like liquid water basically the entire thing, and there's this gigantic tidal wave of an ocean, and from what I've read and the limited understanding I have, is that would be like a wave hitting your knee. It wouldn't be this like 300-foot tall monstrosity that's about to destroy your entire ship. But again, it's a movie, so they got to make it interesting.
Yeah, I honestly haven't heard that gripe. One of my best friends is actually works for NASA. He's a fault systems engineer, and I think he did have some conversations with some people with some scientists at NASA, and I think he did verify that the reason the waves were that big is because this planet is rotating literally next to a black hole.
Mm-hmm.
And so this black hole, obviously, as just basic black hole 101
Mm-hmm.
talk, is black holes gravity is like ridiculously huge, and so it's just the forces of this black hole are just pulling this water, much like tidal forces between the Earth and the moon,
Mm-hmm.
but it's next to a black hole, so of course the like tides in this case are like ridiculously massive.
Mm-hmm.
So I think he was kind of able to verify, I think, but obviously that movie's obviously a few years old. I enjoyed that movie. I did.
Yeah, I think it's one of my favorite as far as like space movies is of the last probably 5 years or so, I guess.
Oh yeah. No, and Christopher Nolan he actually brought on oh my goodness, what was the scientist's name?
Was it it's like Rip something, right?
Yeah, because I
Yeah,
know that,
he's a physicist, right?
yeah, because I know Christopher Nolan wanted to make them travel like faster than light, travel at like warp speed, as Star Trek calls it, or light speed as Star Wars called it. But
Which we get ripped apart if we tried to do, or if they
yeah,
could even reach that,
yeah, and I can't remember the what like specific scientific reason, but
Mhm.
this scientific advisor was like, he's like, no, you, and he like laid out perfectly reasoned why you can't do that. Yeah, no, it was a very thought provoking movie. In terms of the whole like, obviously in terms of the whole like, he goes into a black hole and kind of like manipulates space time to where he's
Mhm.
like talking to his dog. Whether or not that's actually possible, we will probably never know.
Yeah, probably
But
not.
I did like how that was a very interesting take on what could happen, other than the whole like the whole like spaghettification thing,
Mhm.
as we often hear. No, that was one movie that I actually thoroughly enjoyed.
Yeah, I actually really enjoyed the whole when they're showing maneuvers of spacecraft out in space, like especially when they try and dock with the ship that
Yeah.
Matt Damon tries to steal, basically. Sorry for spoiler if anyone's not seen the movie at this point, but there's no sound. They're firing the thrusters and they're moving around and it's showing all that,
Yeah.
and there's nothing. And I think a lot of movies try and just like force that sound into there, which obviously anybody who's even remotely studied space is there's no air to carry sound, so therefore
No, and then especially how when he did try to sabotage it, and he like literally blew the door off and ended up
Mhm.
obviously dying, how how that force caused the spaceship to just keep spinning, and how it would just literally just not stop because there's no air resistance.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do like how they kind of, maintained, for the most part, scientific, accuracies, in terms of that. I do like how the technology in that movie was very much grounded. There was
Mm-hmm.
nothing like too over the top there, in terms of the types of technology that they would use to, travel out to Saturn and then go through this the like spaceship itself was very grounded
Mm-hmm.
and could easily have been built, using today's tech, you know. But I mean, like every movie has to have, certain aspects that might be a
Yeah.
little bit out there. But I do like how both how The Martian and Interstellar did their best to maintain a very like grounded, environment, grounded, kind of,
As much as I love it, I feel that it almost went too scientific for the average like viewer type
yeah,
personality, because they focus so heavily on the physics principles that to try and get it right, that when I watched the movie in the theater the first time, because I'm a nerd and I went to see it twice,
of course.
um, is the first time I went and see it, people were like looking over it to the person they were seeing it with, and they're like, "What does this even mean?" Or when they were leaving, they're like, "I didn't understand this, the whole going through the black hole and
Okay.
manipulating space type thing." So as much as I loved it, I think the average viewer person probably was just lost in the science of it.
Probably. I mean, that's one thing that I will give movies like The Martian, in that you don't have to be into space or a science nerd to really follow along what they were doing. And actually, throughout the movie, they actually did a very like Matt Matt's voiceover. Throughout the movie, that was kind of the purpose of his voiceover, to kind of like describe everything that was going on, so that folks outside of the scientific realm
Mm-hmm.
would understand the kind of basic gist of it.
One thing I'm not 100% clear on, which I mean, maybe you have to ask an astronaut or somebody, I'm not sure, but is in every space movie, a bulkhead gets blown off or something happens and it depressurizes, where it always just like rushes out to an extent that they get like blown out of it. And from what I understand, from what people have written about, is that wouldn't necessarily be the case, but I don't know. You might have a more enlightened opinion on that.
um I think I did watch some like videos, some old NASA videos, where they would like show simulations of what would happen if you had to like puncture, in either the space shuttle or the space station. I know that.
Well, I mean, that was just real world with the whole Russian, Soyuz had the hole in it and they were leaking air
Yeah.
not long ago.
Um.
And they hardly even noticed until someone said, "Hey, you're leaking air, by the way."
Yeah. Yeah. They noticed, because back on Earth they noticed a drop in pressure in the space station, and then they had to dig for the hole. But one thing that they pointed out briefly in The Martian, at the start, when they're running through those fierce hurricane winds
Mm-hmm.
towards the ship, and Mark gets swatted away. They asked one of them asked the doctor how long he could survive without with decompression, and Sebastian Stan responded with less than a minute, because the one thing that I think movies have kind of exaggerated on is that if you're exposed to like atmosphere like Mars, and and a good example of this exaggeration is the movie Total Recall.
Yeah, with Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah, Arnold Schwarzenegger. Where like his face helmet, cracks and his face gets all blah. That actually wouldn't happen. You could survive for a good minute without having significant differences. Would you freeze to death? Yes, because Mars is inexplicably cold, but it wouldn't be like instantaneous. It would, as he said, it would probably take just.
Yeah, I mean, if you could hold your breath for long enough and not freeze in the process, you might be able to run to something and
exactly. No, exactly. But in terms of like having a puncture big enough and then having stuff fly out, I obviously can't answer that just because I don't know. But I mean, I'm very confident studies have been done.
Because I've seen like aircraft depressurization tests back in like the 70s and things like that, and you can physically see like a cloud, within the aircraft at that point, and then it dissipates when they, repressurize it. So I don't know if that's what they're like alluding to, if it'd be the same thing, but
maybe. Yeah, no, I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's just like other movies like Gravity and things like that, where I think you said you haven't seen Gravity, right?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, there's just certain aspects of it where they're out in space and you're like, yeah, I mean, I don't think that you'd probably survive that. Or like the newest one was Ad Astra with Brad Pitt and things like that, where he's flying through a particular area of space and use nothing but a door to cover himself from debris. Like, moving close to 20,000 miles per hour, a fleck of paint hits you and you're pretty much, pink mist at that point. So.
Oh yeah, no. And that's why the International Space Station is extremely heavily shielded. I want to say that they've taken samples or photographs maybe of like punctures within those. They're just like ridiculously thick windows, inches thick, on that on the space station, because stuff, even just the smallest speck, is flying at like close to 20,000 miles an hour. Yeah. Admittedly, I haven't seen Ad Astra yet, but I have a tendency to cheat and read plots on Wikipedia.
Yep.
And so it kind of like went how I expected it to go. He's just like, he's trying to find his dad. He travels around, and then at the very end, I'll just say the ending went about how I kind of expected it to go.
Yeah, my problem with having movies like Interstellar, which I, besides like Apollo 13 and Contact, which I like, probably my favorite movies. Interstellar is my like third, if you want to call, favorite space movie, and I kind of hold things to those calibers. So when you have anything that, for me personally, personal opinion, when you have anything that kind of is less than that, it's hard to like it. But I give it up to him. Any type of space movie is worth watching, I guess.
Probably my least favorite space movie of all time is Prometheus.
Yeah, I wasn't really a big fan of that one either.
No, I mean, I'll just say Ridley Scott is a fantastic director, and he did a fantastic job on The Martian. But Prometheus wasn't my cup of tea, let us say.
So I wanted to so your background is a lot in geology and things like that, and the news came out today or yesterday that we've had a little mini moon probably for the last 3 years or so orbiting us. I wanted to see like what your thoughts on finding that out were.
There are actually a lot more. I don't know if mini moon is the word, but they're called they're not near Earth asteroids, but there's a name for them. There are asteroids. There are just piles of rock buzzing around the Earth. I can't remember how big this little mini moon was.
think they
But
said it was about 3 meters or so, something like that.
oh no, they're piles of rock much larger than that, that are whizzing around the earth constantly. So yeah, I saw it and I just kind of went, eh,
Yeah.
because it's not the first time that we've found an asteroid buzzing around our orbit, caught in our gravity well, whatever you want to call it. There's a lot of them out there. That's why I just kind of shrugged and okay, that's cool. Oh look, Mars quakes. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
It's,
That was awesome news finding out that they're actually detecting them.
yeah, and they're detecting a lot of them. They really are.
One thing that I don't know if you have happened to see all the way through the first episode yet, but my first guest and I were talking. He was asking, he wasn't sure if Mars had earthquakes, and I was like, "Yeah, we do." But he was like, "I wonder if we'd be able to hear them." I said, "Well, I don't know if the instruments had the ability to detect noise per se." But it's interesting that we were discussing that, and then this report comes out of the whole detecting actual quakes and things.
Yeah, they've detected quite a number of them, and I think they detected about 24 that were on the scale of like magnitude 3 to 4,
Mhm.
here on Earth. But what was different is that while earthquakes take place, or the epicenter of earthquakes specifically take place very close to the surface, maybe like mile deep, if that.
Wow.
I'm just spitballing numbers here,
Mhm.
but not that far below the surface. Whereas these quakes epicenters, if I'm not mistaken, take place like or start or the epicenters occur, I want to say 40 to 50 miles below the surface.
Hmm.
Which if you take into account that Mars is roughly half the diameter of Earth, that would be equivalent to an earthquake taking place around 100 miles deep and us still feeling it.
Yeah, that's got to be pretty strong then.
No, yeah, it's no, and just that one thing really caught my attention. It wasn't so much the fact that they found earthquakes, but the fact that they discovered that the ooh, excuse me, the epicenters take place as deep as they do, and they still feel them on the surface. And as I said, that would be, I think, like I said, I'm just spitballing numbers here. I think that would be equivalent to about to epicenters occurring like 100 miles deep and us still feeling it on the surface. Whereas I said before, epicenters don't occur that deep
Mhm.
on Earth.
While we're talking about asteroids being around the moon and stuff, I'm sure probably a lot of people in the scientific community, possibly, I'm spitballing here, um, believe that water and things from Earth were actually brought here by asteroids, because we know that tons of asteroids have minerals, water, frozen CO2,
Yeah,
water ice things on them. Are you of that mind that almost all the water is brought here?
I'm not sure if I could say almost all, but I do believe that a good amount of it was,
Hmm.
because you're absolutely right in terms of comets and asteroids do have, are full of, frozen water. Even the moon itself is believed to have pockets in what's called what's known as the permanently shadowed regions of the moon,
Hmm.
pockets of frozen water. Um, yes, I am of the belief that a good amount of the water that we have on here on the earth was just like the earth itself was brought from the outside.
And if I'm correct, you might be able to educate me on this, is that we've also found evidence of geological formation rocks or other things that were from Mars here, and then possibly even like vice versa, that they found like evidence of some type of transference from obviously billions of years ago.
Yeah, they found one back in ALH 84001, which made the headlines It was actually around the time that it was right before Contact was released. Do you remember the speech in Contact from um, uh, President Clinton talking about the signal and stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
how we're gonna keep listening for answers, whatever he said.
Yep.
That speech was actually about an asteroid that they found in Antarctica. This is called ALH 84001, where they thought that there were like dead microbes on it that came from Mars. Yes, they've found meteorites that actually, I think in my building, the Center for Meteorite Studies, they actually have a meteorite that it's really small, that they believe came from Mars, and they found it. I think they found it in Africa. I think, if I'm not mistaken. But yes, the whole transference thing that you said is entirely possible, and is very much happened.
I've heard some pretty wild theories regarding along the same subject, which I'm not sure how many people believe in, but there's even some like theories I've heard that life was brought here from another planet, already like in humanoid fashion, like from a place like Mars or whatever. Which, I mean, that's neither here nor there. I think you can't test that, obviously, but
All I will say to that is anything is possible.
yeah.
Like I'm a believer in what's known as panspermia, which
Mm-hmm.
means that the like building blocks of life were present on an asteroid or a comet. I'm totally forgetting the like definition of it, but panspermia is essentially where life from somewhere else that evolved somewhere else
Mm-hmm.
left there and then came to Earth. So I'm more of a believer in that in terms of the possibility, but in terms less so than I am of maybe like Martians left Mars because their planet was dying, so they decided to come here.
Yeah,
Is that a possibility? Absolutely.
of course.
As a scientist, it's only natural that I'm open to all possibilities.
Yeah, I'm much more of the camp, if you want to call it that, of what you're talking about, panspermia, where like some form of life was brought here by an asteroid, and the process of it entering the atmosphere and then crashing, spread it throughout the world, and that could be one way that we obtain multicellular life here.
Yeah, no, it is entirely possible.
Because I've had lots of discussions with people about, do aliens exist? Are they aliens that look like humans? Are they aliens that look like the movie Mars Attacks? I mean, there's all types of varying opinions on this subject. But again, I think that it's naive just to think that we're the only things here. It's just, in my mind, it's impossible. I don't see a way that could be the case.
As I said, as a scientist, I'm kind of forced to kind of maintain any and all possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
Is it possible that we are the only ones? Will ever be the only ones? Sure. Do I think that it's statistically unlikely that we're the only ones? Yes. Yeah. But as I said, anything's possible.
Yeah, it's I've heard some interesting theories, which I'm sure you've probably heard of even more than I have. But
oh yeah, I have.
And I haven't seen online any of your interactions regarding this, but I'd like to kind of be like at least broach on every episode of this is people who believe certain established theories like gravity, the fact that space is real, all these things that people are starting to believe nowadays. Do you think it's a regression of understanding for the sake of entertainment and like social probability, or do you think it's actually just a firmly held belief from long ago, like the whole flat Earth deal?
Do I think the Earth is flat? No.
I think it's ridiculous that people even think that, but each his
Yeah.
own, I guess.
It's in terms of like as I said before, as a scientist, I have to be open to any and all possibility.
Mhm.
I'm not open to that possibility. The Earth is not flat. It's just not. I don't need to get into the scientific analysis as to why it's not flat. It's just not. My own take on that. Like, are you asking me why folks believe in stuff like that?
Yeah, like what's your opinion on why it's becoming because I mean it's even been well documented since like World War II. I saw a newspaper article that someone was actually like photographed and scanned, and it showed in London like the Flat Earth Society. So this belief has been around since like before the 1500s. So I'm just curious why you think it's starting to become more of a socially popular thing to believe in.
Social media, because social media obviously didn't exist. What year are we in? 2020. Social media didn't exist all of 15 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
2005, there was no smartphones. The first smartphone didn't come out until what, 08, 09?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, and so just movements like that, just you could pretty much point to really any movement nowadays, be it the feel the burn movement, be it anything.
Mm-hmm.
It's able to spread really fast right now because of social media. In terms of why folks believe in that, I'm still kind of up in the air on. I'm still trying to nail down a hypothesis for that, because right now I really don't know. If I had to pick one, I would maybe say that. See, like I don't even know, and yeah, it's. I'm still trying to figure that one out, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, and like I said on the first episode, I don't knock anybody's belief. Well, let me rephrase that. I try not to knock people's beliefs. Because
yeah.
it's hard for me at times with these things, and I'm not an academic in this field, like even as much as you are, and other physicists and scientists. But I'd almost feel like it'd be almost like an affront to your education and all the time you guys have spent attaining this level of knowledge to someone be like, yeah, you're wrong because Earth is flat. Like,
well,
come on, man.
It's no different than folks who believe that the moon landings were faked.
Yeah.
I have, as I said earlier, I was a student worker at the El Rock Science Ops Center, where I was on 2 projects, and the second one involved literally listening to all of the old Apollo tapes, all of them, and I had to like transcribe certain things and take notes. I was just just kind of like filling out our like work wiki page with all this information for like future reference or something. I literally listened to all of the tapes. The moon landings were not faked. No. Just I dig people who believe that the moon landings were faked more than I do flat earthers.
Yeah.
Because just based on the fact that what was happening during that time? What was the reason why we went to the moon? The Cold War.
Mm-hmm.
So which government entity wanted nothing more than to prove that we were faking going to the moon? The Russians.
Yep.
If they had found even an inkling of a sign that we faked it, or we were faking it, they would have blown that whistle so fast. The moon landings were not faked. They happened. We were there. There's still footprints there. All Apollo 11, 12, math in public. All 6 landing capsules from 11, or I I can't do math right now. Yeah, 11, 12, 14, 15, 16, 17. Yeah, 6 of them. Did I see? Like I have to like double check my math right now. 11, 12, 14, 15, 16, 17. Yeah, 6. All 6 landers are still there.
Mm-hmm.
All 6 flags planted are still there. Well, they're probably not planted because they planted them right next to where they landed, and so when they took off, that exhaust blew them over, or
Yep.
some of them. I rag on moon conspiracy folks, moon landing conspiracy folks than I do on flat earthers. Probably because with flat earthers, it's just not worth it. But with
Yeah.
moon conspirators, it's like, no, bro, I literally listened to the tapes, all of them. It was not fake.
I got into a little bit of a few, like I think 2 or 3 months ago, tithe with it somebody because Neil deGrasse Tyson wrote something, and I follow some of his stuff pretty closely that he writes. And I wrote just like a comment, which is probably some basic like my understanding of science, and it just went 4 or 5 responses of, oh, this is not even true because this and this is flat and we've never been here, and I don't know, I struggle with debating people like that, so my response to that was I didn't respond, but
Oh, good, because I actually don't either, because I have to deal with that too on my posts. Like, yeah, I've had people who say the same thing. How do you believe in that? Because you're at this flat, we didn't go to the moon, and I just it's just not worth it.
I had a coworker who still believes that we haven't been to space even currently, and my response to that was, well, what do the guys on rockets going up to ISS right now, International Space Station, for anyone who doesn't know what that stands for, what do they do? And his response was, oh, they just go up into the atmosphere and then they go land in the ocean and they sit there for 3 days and then they signal somebody. I'm just like, yeah, that's nowhere near what happens, but
no,
you believe what you want as long as it's not hurting anybody. But my problem with that is that people are starting to teach people that that's the way things are now, and I think that's becoming a problem.
I think you're always going to have that small number of the population who want to go against everything, regardless of the scientific accuracies or the data. Climate change is a very good one.
Mm-hmm.
Folks, climate change is real. It's been legitimately, literally proven by scientists
for a long time now.
For a long time, and there are still people in this world who are like, no, it's not real. You're always going to have that like small portion of the population who just wants to go against everything, everyone else, just for the sake of doing it.
Yep.
And that's just the best way I can. That's yeah.
Yeah, especially when you think about something like climate change, and if you look at the human species as just a species in the family of animals, no animal has zero impact on their environment. So to think that humans have no impact at all on the climate that's just asinine, I think.
Oh no, yeah. Like, everyone has an impact. You have the carbon cycle, you have the water cycle,
Mm-hmm.
Rock cycle, I think that's probably not it. And the other cycles are just escaping me. There's obviously more, but like specifically the carbon cycle. When animals eat something, you're obviously taking in carbon, but then when you when you excrete that material, also known as pooping,
Mm-hmm.
You're releasing that carbon back into the atmosphere. That gets goes back in the atmosphere. Then it just the trees take some of it in, and the cycle repeats. Everyone has an impact on the earth. Everyone in everything we do, animals, humans, everything. And especially when that impact is man-made through the use of fossil fuel. Or fossil fuels are fossil fuels themselves are not man-made. They're
Yep.
Earth-made. They're natural um, uh, byproducts of the earth. But us using those fossil fuels for our supposed benefits is us greatly contributing to the cycle of the earth and making it worse.
Mm-hmm.
But as I said, you're always going to have that like small population of people who want to go against long-standing scientific teachings just because.
Yeah, just because it's convenient or it furthers an ideology in some form or fashion.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's just that to me is even harder to understand than people who think that Apollo is fake, because that's here on Earth and we can measure this like within 2 feet of your residence if you really wanted to. So I mean, it's just crazy.
Yeah, the world is a crazy place, and you and I have read some crazy things on Twitter, but all you can do is just like, whatever.
Do you have an opinion or anything on relating to like climate change about alternative like vehicles? Like I own a Model 3, one of the Tesla Model 3s. Yeah. So, and it's personally, I'm not trying to advertise for Tesla. I'm not paid by them or anything. So for anybody who's wondering, I personally just think that it's a great way to just reduce our dependence, because even though the grid currently, at least where I live in Florida, isn't the most like renewable because it's mostly natural gas. So it's not the most like renewable, since even still I'm reducing the amount of carbon or CO2, I'm sorry, emissions that are being put out. So do you have any like opinion on the whole, climate change relating to renewable energy and like alternative fuel vehicles, things like that?
No, I'm a huge supporter of renewable energy. Tesla Model 3 is right now my dream car. It really is. When I actually get a real job and actually in my career starts kicking off, I very much plan on buying one. But I think the Model Y is going to come out soon, and that the Model Y is actually, I mean, it's not as cheap, but I think it's around the same price as a Model 3.
Yep, relatively. It relatively is the same, pretty much.
Oh yeah. So I think by the time that I'm able to afford one, I think that it'll be even more affordable than say the like Model 3 is now. But I'm a huge supporter of renewable energy, of decreasing the effects of climate change, and I'm a huge supporter of what Elon is doing in terms of Tesla and what's his, I'm so sorry, I'm having a brain fart on his solar power company.
The Solar City.
Solar City thing.
Yeah.
Now
it's just like Tesla Energy, but it was Solar City.
Yeah, and so just what he's able to do with that, and how he actually started with nothing. He obviously grew up in South Africa, and then he came over here. He started PayPal, and that was a trek. But just the fact that he's using his kind of influence and his wealth to try to make the world a better place, I think is the thumbs up in my book as far as
Have you ever had the ability to see a rocket launch?
Yes, when I was briefly at Florida Tech for 2 years. I got there fall 2013, left in August 2015. But during that time, up close, I saw the Orion lift off.
Okay.
When they were, it was it the Constellation project got canceled. I forget what they were launching, but it was supposed to be a like, test of a future manned spacecraft. And we showed up, and it was delayed. It was fully clear sky, and it was delayed for mechanical reasons, and we drove back out the next day because it was only like 30 minutes away. And we drove back out the next day, and it was fully overcast. So when it took off, and then like 5, maybe 10 seconds later, it like disappeared into the clouds. So you're like, oh.
Yeah, unfortunately, that happens more often than not around here.
Yeah, and so that was the only one I ever saw up close, but I saw a number like standing on the rooftop of our science building at Florida Tech, and we saw them all take off. But that was the only one I've ever actually seen like really up close.
One reason I'm asking is there's obviously like the launch cadence in space, specifically by companies like, ULA, SpaceX, more so probably SpaceX and ULA as far as like cadence of launch. And we're launching more and more things up into the atmosphere. Most recently, like the Starlink satellites for global internet and all that.
Yeah.
Do you have a thought on what, if that's doing anything or will do anything to like astronomers and future study of, the sky from Earth-based, telescopes and things like that?
I have not researched it as much as I probably should. I've heard mixed. I've heard that obviously when they go up, they're in a very low orbit, and so yeah, it kind of hinders with observational techniques. But I've also read that they're kind of designed to have very high orbits, and so while they initially start off low, then they obviously use their fuel to kind of push themselves out farther. I could be wrong on that. As far as it like interfering with any sort of like observational astronomy, I would have to kind of look into it further to kind of give a firm opinion on it.
Because I've heard a lot of back and forth on that, and like you said, from what I've understood, is they're made to boost their orbit. So by the time it's actually operational, you can't notice it. But
yeah, right now there are like hundreds, if not thousands, of satellites, both currently running and dead. There's just a lot of junk out there, like literal junk, like satellite. Like we've launched out satellites to like high orbit, and then it runs out of fuel. We just leave it there, and it's still just chilling. So I don't see how like how many total did you launch? Like 60, something like that?
I think there's been 2 or 3 launches of 60 in a batch. So at most, probably like 120.
Was it? I'm gonna have to let me just Google it real quick because I don't.
Because I know I think the first one had like between 5 to 15, I believe, on as a payload, and then he launched 2 or 3 with like 60 in there.
Oh yeah. No. Oh wow, that's a lot higher than I thought. Yeah, 242. Yeah, it's a lot higher than I thought. But I mean, that's 242 on top of the already thousands of pieces of space junk out there. And you're gonna tell me that people haven't complained until now?
Yeah.
That's what I kind of. I mean, there's like it's just there's just junk, literal junk out there floating that we launched and we just ran out of fuel and we just kept it up there. Will some of it eventually come back down and deorbit and burn up? Sure, but if you were to look at a map of the space junk around the Earth, it's like it almost looks like you can't see the Earth. So I just don't see how a few hundred extra pieces of hardware is going to make a difference.
Yeah, and I think that I've seen some interesting proposals from even like SpaceX and other companies to handle all this space junk. So I hope that they become a reality, because I know with the new Starship, he was going to like try and basically like just scoop it, with like a big payload opening in the front and kind of just grab a bunch of it at one time. So, I mean, I think something along those lines would be beneficial, but it might also destroy a lot of other stuff. Who knows? But
I'm obviously not a physicist. I'm a geologist. But as with anything Elon related, it always turns out to be much harder than what he says he's going to do. As far as grabbing stuff in orbit,
yeah, it's gonna be a little bit hard, I think.
it's gonna be just a scotch harder than how he just talks about. I'm just gonna go up and scoop it. No, you're not. because this stuff is orbiting, but it's orbiting at thousands upon thousands of miles per hour.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's like easy to make the argument, well, yeah, we like the space shuttle used to catch up with satellites and like dock with it and stuff. Yeah, but that's a lot trickier to accomplish than you think, because you have to like match its speed, and you have to,
I mean, even just like going to the space station right now, I think a lot of people think of space as this, well, we're on the ground, this is the air, and like a plane, we just fly straight up and then we can get to it, right? You know, I think a lot of people view space as that, and they don't realize that we have to match orbits and we have to match speed and all types of variations of factors that go into that.
Yeah, I mean, Elon has obviously come a long way. He obviously has Tesla, Solar City, or the Tesla Energy, SpaceX. He is about to what month are we in? March? I think May is the like target date for launching the 2 astronauts.
Yep.
He is about to launch people into space from American soil for the first time since 2011. So for the most part, he puts his money where his mouth is.
Yep.
But when he like initially starts discussing stuff, especially about like going to Mars, everyone in my field just goes, because it's just a lot. It just turns out to be a lot harder. It's just it just is. I think Falcon Heavy first launched in what, 2018, 17? When did it first launch?
2018, yeah, February 2018. I was at that launch actually.
He initially targeted it for 2012.
Yep.
So every time Elon like puts a date on something, everyone in my field just adds 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
Because while he's obviously extremely ambitious and he is about to be responsible for launching the first American astronauts from American soil in 9 years, this thing called reality likes to come in and tell him, no, you can't do that. No, you can't do this.
Yep.
But no, just Elon is obviously in just beyond ambitious, incredibly ambitious, and he's done great things with Tesla and SpaceX. But initially, his like expectations as to how things are going to go have to come back down to earth.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that there's anything that like private industry has done regarding space that is, let's say, like quote unquote better than the way certain things have been handled, like with the shuttle era or anything like that, with like returning to us? Or do you think that maybe that NASA should still have the controlling arm, which they still pretty much do, I mean, let's be honest, into like space operations?
I think it should continue to be a partnership, much like it is now. Even during the you know, when they were designing the Saturn V, a lot of that was contracted out to like Lockheed Martin, and you know, and so they, you know, so there's always going to be this like partnership between government and private, you know, companies. But I think more so now, because you know the Apollo, the Saturn V was like, you know, in like, yes, it was contracted out, but it was also entirely run and operated by NASA.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas nowadays, I could be wrong, but I think the only time really NASA steps in is to do like safety checks, which is why the like Crew Dragon capsule pushed back, because it wasn't deemed to be, you know, crew ready. It meets certain like safety specs, safety requirements. So I think that sort of checks and balances is very important. But I think going forward, especially like, sending astronauts back to the moon, is going to be this continued partnership between government, in this case NASA, and private companies like SpaceX and Boeing and such.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think private industry like Blue Origin, the New Glenn rocket they're going to have, which will be somewhat similar to Starship, from what I understand, or Starship and Super Heavy, if I want to be accurate, of the booster. What's your take on the first individuals that aren't scientific missions going into space missions to the moon or Mars that people like Elon or Jeff Bezos want to do with their respective companies? Do you think that that's a good idea, that the everyday person will get to just launch, or do you think that they should be trained well ahead of time? Like, what's your kind of take on the whole like flight to other colonies, if you want to call them that?
First question, yes, I do think it's great. I think eventually we will become a spacefaring society.
Mm-hmm.
So I think space is more and more, or less and less, becoming this kind of like exclusive club, if you will, of like select few chosen by NASA or whoever, European
Mm-hmm.
Space, chosen essentially by the government, through this like long, arduous application process. I think that within the next 15, 20 years, we are going to see more kind of like everyday people traveling up. It's initially going to start with, like suborbital flights, Virgin Galactic,
Mm-hmm.
Blue Origin. You're going to go up, you're going to orbit a couple times, and you're going to come back down. But I think in like 15, 20 years, you are going to see the development of, actual like literal space colonies, whether it's in low Earth orbit, or at what's known as one of the Lagrange points, in the Earth Moon orbit.
Mm-hmm.
No, I think it's only a matter of literal time before the kind of like everyday man, you and me, people who wouldn't otherwise have like qualified to be an astronaut for NASA,
Mm-hmm.
will eventually start going up, and and folks will eventually start living and possibly even working in outer space. Be it, as I said, if it's an orbiting space colony or a settlement on the moon. No, I'm very excited for what companies like Virgin Galactic and Blue Origin are obviously doing.
So if you were the deciding authority and it wasn't necessarily like up to a government, would you still want us to focus on missions to Mars in terms of like colonizing another world? Or would you believe somewhere like Europa would be the place that we should be focusing on, if we could have the ability to get to these places at the same level of getting to like the moon, let's say, and the technology was already there?
Are you talking about sending people to places like Europa?
Yeah.
I think eventually we will, but I think just like anything, it's one step at a time.
Mm-hmm.
We obviously went to the moon. Now we're going to go back to the moon in 4 years. We're going to, but instead of just going back to hang out like we did before, we're actually going back to stay. Then we're going to use that as kind of a learning tool before we go off to Mars. And then once we kind of establish how to really run a settlement, on Mars, then I think we'll start sending people out to the outer solar system. Am I a little bit hesitant to send people to Europa? Yes, only because of the intense amounts of radiation from that Jupiter, gives
Mm-hmm.
off, which is why we can't have spacecraft orbit even like so much as orbit Jupiter for long, even just one orbit, because of the intense amount of radiation that it throws off. No, I think eventually humans will make it to the outer solar system. Well, I think it's going to take some time. I think we're still several decades away from sending people to the outer solar system.
Mm-hmm.
To be honest.
I think it's well within our current technological prowess to have, I don't know, maybe 100 people, let's say, on Mars by like 2040, 2050 time frame. I
Yeah,
think that's probably well within our time frame of what we could do.
yes.
But what I'm curious as to, will we have people in the outer solar system by, let's say, 100 years from now? That's where, do we need like orders of magnitude improvement in engine technology to, speed these timelines up? I'm not sure if that's what it'll take to actually get out there with humans.
Short answer, yes. We need definite improvements in travel capabilities in order to get out there faster. Because right now, because we have to use what's known as a gravity assist, we have to slingshot around these planets, Venus and then Earth. Oftentimes, it takes like 7 years to get out there. It's going to be such a powerful rocket that if it just punches its way there, it could get to Jupiter in like, I think, a year and a half. But you're also talking about near constant velocity. It's much different having people on that thing than it is having just robot.
And obviously the problems that people have been tackling in movies, like we were talking about for forever, the whole like hibernation thing. I think right now, from what I've understood, is we get like 3 days at best to have someone in like in a somewhat medically induced hibernation before the body starts breaking down and things to that extent. So thinking we're going to do like 10-year missions out to space while people are sleeping is not there yet, obviously.
No, I think we're still several decades from understanding the whole hibernation thing, and I think we're even longer in terms of sending people out to, or like maybe not, just even like sending people out to the outer solar system.
Yeah, because I've had a lot of people talk about, well, why Mars versus places like Europa, or I mean, obviously for most people who may not understand, there's a lot of planets we can't go to because we'll pretty much die if we can even make it there without dying first. But there's a lot of people that I've had the discussion with of like, why are we focusing so much on Mars versus the moon? And that's why I figured I'd ask you that question.
Yeah, Mars is, I mean, it's obviously not hospitable, but it does possess conditions that I'll just say will make it easier for us to kind of, maybe settle or, go for some science. You are going to have the whole like radiation thing because Mars doesn't have a magnetosphere like the, Earth does.
Mm-hmm.
But, we can't really send folks to Venus because Venus's temperature and just pressure alone would just literally crush us. And it's also actually a lot harder from a physics standpoint to go to Venus and Mercury than it is to go to Mars, because the more inner you go in the solar system, Venus and Mercury, the sun's gravity is greater, and so which is why past missions to Venus and Mercury, you've had to do these like planetary flybys, not just to speed up spacecraft. As I said, use these planetary gravity assists to speed up spacecraft and send them to the outer solar system. You actually use these same methods, these same maneuvers to slow spacecraft down.
Mm-hmm.
And which is why it would be significantly harder. But obviously going to Mars, it would be easier because you're, dealing with less of the sun's, pull. Its environment is, nowhere near as like hostile as say, Venus and, even
Mm-hmm.
Mercury. There's a lot learn on Mars in terms of the geology,
Mm-hmm.
from a scientific standpoint. But I think that's why so many people have been so fascinated by Mars, is because in the past it was a much warmer, wetter environment, and a lot of even though Venus has been shown to have the same kind of past warmer, wetter, or less warmer, but in much wetter environment. But I think one reason why I'm specifically fascinated with Mars is just it's our nearest, most likely neighbor to where we can possibly settle and stay for long periods of time.
Yeah, and I think the one of the attributes, along with many of the ones you're already stating, that more so than the moon is just it's still only what, a third Earth gravity, and the moon's like about an eighth or something like that gravity.
Yeah, Mars is the third. I think the moon is the sixth. I could be wrong.
Sixth gravity.
Yeah.
I think just the physical effects on the human body would therefore be aided because it's still slightly more gravity, obviously, than the moon is.
Yes, but you will still deal with the effects of weightlessness.
Yep.
Much like you would deal with in terms of long-term stays on the moon. Obviously, I think Apollo 17 stayed the longest. I want to say they were on the surface for a week, I think.
I think that sounds about right. Yeah, from what I remember.
Yeah, I think the whole mission took about 2 weeks. I could be wrong. I'm kind of spitballing here, but I want to say they were on the surface for a week. So being on a week doesn't really have the same effects. In being a week in 1/6 gravity, obviously doesn't have the same effects as like a week in zero gravity. On the space station. And being on Mars does have a larger gravity, but you would still deal with the same kind of effects that astronauts still deal with in a less than 1 Earth G environment.
So we've had a lot of well, I wouldn't say a lot, but I guess in scientific terms, successes of landing on asteroids lately in the past 10 years or even less. Do you think that these missions will one day lead to a private industry capability of resource mining, or
Yes,
do you think that that would be beneficial for people based on all the minerals and things we found?
Yes, I think that it will become a viable kind of prospect in the future, especially in terms of contributing in terms of construction materials to build future settlements, whether it's orbiting space colonies or settlements on the moon, whatnot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I would imagine from a geology perspective, it would also possibly lend an idea as to origins of the universe and where certain things have come from.
Yes, absolutely, agreed.
I've had a lot of people, especially the latest one was that Bennu that we landed on. I'm trying to recall the name. Try and be like, why are we wasting all this time and resources on stuff like that? And I was like, this might be one of the most important expeditions we've ever done in space, because some of these asteroids have been around since the formation of the solar system. So why wouldn't we want to study them?
Yes. No, and which is why we're going to study an asteroid called 16 Psyche, because 16 Psyche is believed to be the remnants of a planetary embryo. Essentially, it's like core.
Okay.
And obviously, we've never been to the core of our Earth, but this is opportunity to literally study the remnants of a planetary core and what could have become a planet, but just never really obviously got there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I don't know. I think a lot of people arbitrarily view space as this thing that doesn't necessarily matter in terms of humanity, and I kind of scoff at that only because of the technology that has been invented because of that is mind blowing. I mean, every computer or cell phone owes space travel to its existence. So, I mean, things like that kind of blow me away. I appreciate you being on and taking the time to do this podcast with me. Is there
Sure.
any closing thoughts or things we can look forward to coming from you?
I myself am in the works of trying to do a kind of video podcast. Now that I kind of got this like PhD cycle out of the way, and I know I'm kind of not really moving this next year. I am kind of looking for jobs. I'm going to apply for a couple adjunct jobs coming up, but yeah, for me, I'm just going to keep my Twitter thing going. As I said, Outer Solar System Moons, your 3D journey. Find it on Etsy. I just got 5-star review number 9 and 10 yesterday and today.
Congrats on that.
Thank you. And so yeah, I'm up to 10 5-star reviews, and yeah, just gonna keep my Twitter thing going for everyone else. Just never stop exploring. Keep looking up. I'm gonna keep everyone in touch in terms of my research trip next weekend. And yeah.
All right, man. Well, it seems like we got some things to look forward to. And again, I appreciate you taking the time to be on the show with me today.
Sure. Anytime.